With our channel, your time will fly by. Welcome to the world of stories. Subscribe, like, and comment. Your opinion is very important to us. My name is Michael. I'm married to Lisa, and we live in perfect harmony. It's just like any other American family. Well, and the relationship with my mother-in-law, Marguerite, seems normal. Well, normal in the sense that she's never complained much, just little things. My mother-in-law is 42 years old, a very beautiful, slender brunette. Of course, I never looked at her that way, never paid attention to my wife's mother in that respect. But the fact remains that she is a striking woman. One day, Lisa and I were just visiting her parents, just stopping by to see her father, Richard, who was Margaret's husband. Richard greeted us with a smile. Margaret looked pleased too. All in all, it promised to be a pleasant evening. We sat down at the table, and oh my, there was everything: cognac, red and white wine, whiskey. And there was so much food that my eyes widened. It had been a long time since I had seen such abundance. Margaret had really done her best, and it was obvious that she wanted to make the evening special. We began to eat and drink slowly, and then my mother-in-law suddenly said, "Let's have a glass of whiskey for the occasion." I wanted to say that I was dizzy and needed to lie down, intending to go to bed. But Margaret stopped me. "Michael," she said, "where are you going? Sit with me for a while. Let's talk." She had this intense look in her eyes, and I felt I couldn't just walk away. We sat down together, me and my mother-in-law, had another drink, and she started telling me about her life, about her youth. She talked about her dreams and aspirations, how she used to be adventurous, and how she felt that part of her had been lost over the years. I listened, intrigued by this more vulnerable side of her that I had never seen before. I listened but couldn't escape the thought that it was time for me to head to bed, as I was already seeing double. At that moment, Margaret stood up and said, "I'm going to go to the bathroom now and I'll head to bed." I sat there waiting for her to come out so I could say goodnight and leave. About 5 minutes passed and I heard her call, "Michael, come here." For a moment I was surprised. I wondered what could have happened. I went to the bathroom door and asked what was wrong, and she said, "I can't reach the towel. Could you hand it to me?" Of course I was confused. I asked if the door was locked, but she said it wasn't and that I should just walk in. Well, I walked in and there was Margaret, smiling at me in a way that left me speechless. I stood wide-eyed, not knowing where to look, and she walked right up to me. "What are you doing, Michael? Don't you like me at all? Come on, Lisa's asleep, Richard is asleep. No one will know anything." She continued, "I see the way you look at me sometimes. I know you've been thinking about it." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, and I felt like time had slowed down. On the one hand, I just didn't know what to do. She was undeniably beautiful, and the situation was exciting. On the other hand, she was my mother-in-law. But Margaret didn't seem like she was going to take no for an answer. She moved closer, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "Come on, Michael, don't be afraid. I'll teach you things you've never dreamed of." And I'm ashamed to admit it, but I gave in. Maybe it was the whiskey, maybe it was the situation. But in a moment I was kissing Margaret, forgetting everything. You know what happened next. And it turned out she wasn't lying. I'd never experienced anything like it. After that, going to the bathroom, I didn't know what to do. Eventually I cleaned myself up and slipped outside. The house was quiet. Everyone was asleep. I tiptoed into the room where Lisa was sleeping, lay down next to her, and didn't sleep a wink until morning. Lisa suspected nothing, and Margaret acted as if nothing had happened. At breakfast she was perfectly calm, smiling and chatting, as if we hadn't crossed any boundaries the night before. We continued to visit her parents after that night, but every time I saw Margaret, I felt uneasy. She seemed to relish the tension, the mystery we now shared. Sometimes, when Lisa wasn't looking, Margaret would smile slyly or throw me an understanding look that made my heart sink. It was like a game to her, and I felt trapped. I wanted to tell her it had to end, but the words wouldn't come. I don't know what will happen next, but I know it shouldn't happen again. Sometimes, though, late at night, I still think about that bathroom and Margaret. Margaret's presence began to affect me more than I wanted to admit. I replayed that night in my head, analyzing every detail, every word she said, every move she made. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, the memories so vivid that it felt like everything was happening all over again. Lisa would sleep peacefully beside me, and I would stare at the ceiling, tormented by conflicting emotions: guilt, desire, confusion. Margaret acted perfectly normal at family gatherings, but sometimes, when no one was around, she would touch my arm or whisper something too close. It kept me from forgetting. I tried to pull away, but it was hard when Lisa wanted to visit her parents every weekend. Every time we left, I braced myself for what might happen, for Margaret's playful teasing or her attempts to leave me alone. It never went as far as it did that first night, but the tension between us was undeniable. One night, after another dinner at their house, Margaret cornered me in the kitchen while Lisa and Richard were outside. She put her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You know, Michael, I haven't forgotten. And I know you haven't forgotten either." Her warm breath touched my ear, and I felt my resolve weaken for a moment. But then I thought of Lisa and pulled away. "Margaret, we can't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine, and for the first time something flashed in them, maybe regret or disappointment. I walked out of the kitchen with my heart pounding and joined Lisa and Richard outside, trying to pretend everything was okay. But inside, I knew things were far from okay. I knew I had to find a way to end what was between Margaret and me before it ruined everything. But even as I made that promise to myself, I couldn't get rid of the feeling of her touch or the way she looked at me that night in the bathroom. The conflict inside me was building, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it in.